Welcome students to the lecture 2 of macroeconomics. As we have seen last time, we have seen the scope that we need to cover in our module this semester. So we have seen that the scope will cover the main theory in macroeconomics. So the first theory is the theory of income and employment. So today we are going to discuss the theory of income and employment. But first of all, let's recap. Let's recall that there is an interdependence between microeconomics and macroeconomics. Why? This is because even though there is the difference between these two, but they are not completely independent, because whenever there is a change in one, there will be an implication in another. Like, for example, uh, increasing the saving by an individual household, which is a concern by microeconomics, shall definitely cause a fall in consumption in the economy. So the aggregate consumption is a concern dealt with in macroeconomics. So you see that these two branches of economics cannot be totally taken as independent, even though they are considered to be different, and their difference is vividly clear. So, similarly, a situation of persistent fall in general price level will also cause a falling in income of individual household through a chain of foreign investment and employment due to fall in profits. So this tries to show how microeconomics that we have seen in our first semester, and now we are dealing with macroeconomics that I told you that it deals with more of the aggregate concepts, aggregate things. We do not deal with individual concern anymore, like we were doing it in microeconomics. Microeconomics, we're dealing like individual income, how household take decision, the consumer behavior. But now in macroeconomics, we are going to see now all those things, but in a way they are aggregate for all, or for bigger view. So we have seen that macro and microeconomics are interdependent. But why do we need a separate theory for macroeconomics? So the two reasons for it is that what is good at micro level may not be good at at the level of the economy as a whole, or at the level of macroeconomics. So accordingly, we need a separate theory to discuss the issues in microeconomics and macro issues. And the macroeconomic problem, example like inflation, deflation, the general unemployment, can be comprehended and solved only through macro level program and policies. So there are some main term, or the operational term, we are going to need while discussing this theory of employment and income. First of all, we have to know that for this theory, we are going to discuss the classical theory of income and employment, and also the one known as Keynesian theory of income and employment. These two are both the theory of income and employment, but with different advocates and with different assumptions, with different views. So we are going to see how they are conflicting, what some people were suggesting, the critiques of one another. So we will try to understand what they were thinking about income and employment at the level of macro. So first of all, we need to see these main terms. There are many, but like we need employment. So understanding what is the employment. Like, for example, when we say employment, according to the classical theorists, we mean a situation when a person is able and willing to take up a job and gets employed. At full employment, we need a situation where all the workers who are able and willing to work will get the employment, so they are full employed. Under employment, it's a situation where people are engaged in job, but they do not get these jobs according to their capability, so they are underemployed. For example, you are a graduate. Maybe in Rwanda, we consider that a graduate should not get paid less than 250,000. of Ronald Planks. It's an example I give. But because the jobs are not available, they are not enough. If you wait for the job that are going to pay you the money you are qualified for, you would stay a long time jobless, and you decide to take the job that you find. At that time, maybe you are getting paid 100,000. So in that case, we consider you underemployed. So in this case of Keynesian, I mean classical theories, when they say underemployment, they mean that those people who get the job, but the job pay them under what their capabilities, what their efficiency and qualification requires. So there is also another term, unemployment. Unemployment is a situation when a person is willing to work, but the job is not available, so he is or she is unemployed. There's also an involuntary unemployment. It's a situation where there are jobs, but people are not willing to take those jobs because those job does not meet the condition they want. For example, uh, like I told you, underemployment, there is a job, but you take it because there is no other better job which meets your qualification. But for involuntary unemployment, it's when there is a job and they are willing to employ you, but you, because the situation, for example, maybe they are paying you less, for example, maybe the condition you want are not being met, the contract they are giving you are not satisfied, so you decide to say no. So that is an involuntary unemployment. Sorry, that one I was explaining is what we know as voluntary unemployment. I'm sorry, that is a bit of confusion. But involuntary unemployment that we have here, it means that you are willing to take the job under any condition, under any payment, under any contract they are giving you, but you fail to get that job. That is involuntary unemployment. Like you have been looking for the job, but you can't find the job easily. That is involuntary. But the one I was telling you that you decide to refuse because they are paying you less, because the contract does not meet your qualification, your wishes or your conditions you have put, that is a voluntary now, a voluntary. So this is the voluntary. I've come to explain to you the cyclical employment, technological. So the terms are many, but maybe you will take enough time to pass through them. You have the handout, so you can read them attentively and understand. Like for example, the frictional employment. It's a temporary employment which exists during the period of transfer of labor from one occupation to another. For example, you fresh graduate or first time job seeker, so that time you sit waiting to get a job, or you're transferring from one job going to another because maybe you have found another opportunity which is better than what you had. This is known as frictional unemployment. So this can be caused by the dissatisfaction from old job, the skill gap, or also the personal reasons, like for example what I told you before, like you need better salaries, you need better contracts, you need better condition, working condition. Maybe you have got a job nearby your residence. So this is a personal reason. So there are many operational terms that we need to use, but because there are many, so you can continue from reading them from the handout. For this session, let's go straight um, to the theory that we need to discuss today. So, old classical economists like Adam Smith, Ricardo, Say, Mead, and Senior believe in laissez-faire policy. In laissez-faire policy, we have seen that it's about the free market or capitalism. So, no government intervention in an economy activity. So, this economists like them who have this belief in free market, they developed the classical theory of income and employment. This theory, what does it state? This theory states that the full that full employment in a normal feature of a capitalist economy is something which is like always there. So it suggests that there is always the full employment in a capitalist or in a free market. The classical theory of employment rules out the possibility of unemployment in a free market economy. Unemployment, as we have seen in operational term we are going to use, we have seen that it's that time when a person is willing to be employed to get a job, but he's unable to find the job. So this is what the classical theory rules out in economy. The classical theory suggests that there is always a full employment, which is where everyone who is able and willing to take a job finds a job. So according to the classical theory, the economy would always be in a full employment. Full employment equilibrium. When we say full employment equilibrium, we refer to the equilibrium where all resources in the economy are fully utilized or employed. So when equilibrium between aggregate demand and aggregate supply takes place at full employment of resources, it is called full employment equilibrium. So full employment equilibrium means that there are no unused resources, so there is no involuntary unemployment. So all resources are fully utilized. So in such a situation, aggregate demand is neither in excess nor deficient, but equal to supply at full employment level. So this is like a high level, a needed level of every economic. So we can take it as an ideal situation that every economy is working toward. So if it's an ideal economy, it's like a yardstick against which every economy is evaluating against itself against. So the full employment level is that the level there is no involuntary unemployment, means that everyone who can take a job is employed. So the classical theory of employment is based on the three main assumptions. The first one is the Say's law of market, the second one is the flexibility of interest rate, and the third one is the flexibility of wage rate. According to the Say's law, what does it say? So this is the first assumption of this theory, the classical theory of income and employment. It suggests that the supply creates its own demand. So it's an automatic mechanism which establishes equilibrium between aggregate demand and aggregate supply. In other words, when an economy produces a certain level of real GDP, when resources are fully utilized, it also generates the income needed to purchase what? To purchase all that level of real GDP. So in other words, the economy is always capable of demanding all the output that its worker and firms choose to produce. Hence, the economy is always capable of achieving the natural level of real GDP. So the implication of classical system is that there is no possibility of overproduction or underproduction. However, the achievement of the natural level of your GDP is not as simple as Say's law would seem to suggest. Why? Because imagine if some income got by people are not spent for buying or demanding the output or the things, the final goods on the market. What will happen? So there is no guarantee that all this income will be spent, because some of this income will be kept or will be put aside as a saving. So income that is saved is not used in consumption. Why? Because if I choose to save some money, for example, if you get the income of 200,000 and you choose that you consume 150,000, but 50 you will keep it for saving, in that case you see that all the income will not match with the expenditure on the market. So that saving will imply that all the output on the market will not be purchased because some money are not used to consume. So this implies, as I was saying, that the demand for these goods and services will be less than the supplied things or output on the market. So if aggregate demand falls below aggregate supply, what will happen? Due to aggregate saving, supplier will cut back on the production they were making. Imagine if you were used maybe that you produce 200 unity, but people start to think on saving, and after some time you realize that you no longer sell all the 200 unity. What will you do? So you will start to decrease the amount of the unity you were producing. So if you decrease the amount of the unity you were producing, this means that some resources you were using, you're going to keep them unused. So if they are kept unused, this means the economy did not achieve the full employment level. So when employment of economies resources fall below the full employment level, now the equilibrium level of your GDP will fall below its natural level. You have seen that the natural level of your GDP is when aggregate demand meets the aggregate supply at a full employment level. So consequently, the economy may not achieve the natural level of the real GDP if there is aggregate saving. So the classical theorists, however, they do not agree with this challenge or this critique, because they think that the funds from aggregate saving are eventually borrowed and turned into investment expenditure, which are a component of real GDP. So aggregate saving is a part of real GDP, and the classical theorists argue, or they defend themselves against this possibility by saying that if I choose to save my money, I save it, but on the other hand, there is someone who needs to borrow some money for investment. So whatever I save, it's going to be to come back in the economy in form of investment of borrowers from maybe the banks, from different financial institutions. So this is how they have defined themselves, and the investment expenditure is part of the GDP. As you can see in the formula, GDP includes the personal consumption expenditure, the government expenditure, the business expenditure, and also the net exports. So consider, however, what happens when the funds from aggregate saving exceed the needs of all borrower in economies. So suggest or think about when people who are borrowing money does not borrow all the money which is saved in the bank. What happens in this situation? The real GDP will still fall below its natural level because the investment expenditure will be less than the level of aggregate saving. So means that aggregate saving, there are some saving which are going to stay there unused. So this is an illustration of how the interest rate now can fix this problem. For example, we have the aggregate saving, which is shown on the figure by the graph S. We have this S. So after some time, aggregate saving represented by the curve S in an upward sloping function of the interest. As the interest rate rises, the economy tends to save more. So aggregate investment represented by the curve I is down-sloping function of the interest rate. As the interest rate rises, the cost of borrowing increases and investment expenditure will decline. Initially, aggregate saving and investment are equivalent at the interest rate I. So if aggregate saving were to increase, causing the S curve to shift to the right, to have the new curve now S dash, then at the same time interest rate I should be, then at the same interest I, there will be a gap between the investment and the saving. So aggregate investment will be lower than aggregate saving, which implies the equilibrium level will be low. However, with the flexibility of interest rate, classical theorists believe that under this circumstance, the interest rate will fall, causing investors to demand more of the available savings. So in fact, the interest rate will fall far enough from I to I dash, as we have seen on the figure. In figure, we have seen to make the supply of funds from aggregate saving equal to the demand for funds by or investor. Hence, there will be an increase in saving. An increase in saving will lead to an increase in investment expenditure through a reduction of what? Of an interest rate. And this is the assumption, the second assumption of this classical theorists. So the flexibility of interest rate as well as other prices is self-adjusting mechanism of classical theory that ensures the full employment, which is assumed by what? By classical theories, as we have seen before. So the flexibility of interest rate keeps the money market or the market for loanable funds in equilibrium all the time, and thus prevent real GDP to be what? To fall below its natural level.